Hello everyone, my name is Tax Auber and welcome back to the Lovecraftian Video Game Retrospective and welcome to Tales from Dunwich, Episode 1, Welcome Home, My Son. Tales from Dunwich is a third-person point-and-click adventure game made in the Unity engine, and in Tales from Dunwich you take the role of Sam, a young man who is asked by his father to return to his hometown of Dunwich. And Dunwich is essentially what you would expect from a comparably simplistic point-and-click adventure. The only button you need for the game is the left mouse button. You order Sam to walk around, you click on objects to interact with them or examine them, you pick up items to use on other items or to use on objects within the environment, and you advance on a screen-by-screen basis. This game does have a fixed camera angle, and that can be an issue from time to time, but I'll get back to that later. Story-wise, the game is not very inventive. It starts with somewhat of a mystery. You don't really know why you're supposed to go back to Dunwich, and unfortunately we never really find out. It turns out your father is an investigator, and he was investigating an old mansion. There's a little bit more to that, but overall we barely get to know what's actually happening, and the game essentially leaves us hanging for the second episode. Unfortunately, we know so little that I didn't really care about Sam, about his father, or about any of the other characters, all of which are only mentioned because we don't really meet anybody in the game and we don't really talk to anybody. So at the end I wasn't really left wanting to know more about what's going to happen. Instead I was more disinterested, which is not really good. Overall, the game's atmosphere is unfortunately lacking. The game does use a lot of assets from the Unity asset store and also recycles a lot of assets. You spend the majority of the game in a small area outside Dunwich and in an old mansion, the aforementioned old mansion. And unfortunately the old mansion is the most generic, rundown, brownish mansion you could imagine. It's not scary at all. In fact, the game overall is not scary at all. It doesn't look terrible, but it looks extremely generic. The sound effects are not very good. There's barely any music. There's barely any dialogue. There's some read out dialogue, but for the most part you just click on objects and there's just some text appearing and you have to read it for yourself. So I can't really recommend this game as a horror game because it's just not scary. There's actually some supernatural elements, well, I guess you could call them supernatural in the game, but even those are not scary at all and they look almost goofy at times. For example, at one point you run into a corpse and the corpse is horribly disfigured, but it looks extremely poorly done and very cartoonish, and it's amusing at best and not scary at worst. The game also has somewhat clunky controls. It's not too bad, but occasionally you want to click on a point where you advance to the next screen, but Sam just runs past it, and occasionally the Resident Evil style fixed camera angles get in the way when you try to move on to the next part of the screen while still being on the same map, but it's not really clear where you have to click to actually advance, and occasionally Sam also just disappears because he runs off screen but the camera angle doesn't change. The puzzles are also really simplistic. Oftentimes you just enter a room, there's a locked door, you enter the next room and you find a key, or maybe you combine two items and then you find a key. And the puzzles also don't feel organic at all. They don't really feel like they are puzzles from a real world. They feel extremely video gamey. Of course, this is a video game and it will always feel video gamey in a certain regard. But since this is a horror game and it's supposed to be scary, atmospheric and thrilling, that doesn't really help at all. For example, at one point you find a safe, you find a combination and open it, and in the safe you find a bullet and a wrench. And Sam asks himself, why would someone put a wrench and a bullet into a safe? And the answer is, we don't know. We don't know whose safe that is actually, and we don't know why those items were put there. From an in-universe point of view, from an out-of-universe point of view, we know it because those are two items we need to solve the next puzzle. But it feels very contrived and extremely artificial. So, in addition to that, the game is also really short. You can complete in about 45 minutes, probably less depending on how puzzle savvy you are and how lucky you are, because occasionally you just run around a little bit searching for the next item. It's not too bad. It just depends on what you want to explore next. So overall, I can't really recommend this game. It's not a free game, it costs €5 or whatever your local equivalent is. You do get the second episode for that as well though, and that's the one I'm going to review next. So we're going to see whether Tales from Dunwich episode 2 improves upon the first game, but based on the first game alone, I cannot recommend this game at all. It's not horrible, but it's just so generic and feels a little bit cheap that it's just not worth playing. Thanks for watching, and I shall see you next time. Take care and goodbye.